Spider-Man is arguably the biggest IP when it comes to PlayStation and leveraging the strength of that brand, that hero, and of course the sequel that's coming, Spider-Man 2 to the PlayStation 5. It is going to be unstoppable. The first game on the PlayStation 4 and the subsequent upgrade on the PlayStation 5 were absolutely incredible. It set the benchmark for a superhero game in an open world, the way that the character is supposed to move throughout the world and giving the player the ability to do things that you just can't do in video games. That's the essence of being a superhero, and they nailed it with Spider-Man. So, a lot of people are asking, what can Microsoft and Xbox do to counter this huge IP, to get their own superhero branded game, to give them a sense of just that huge IP, that huge presence that these superhero games tend to have. Now, it's going to be super expensive to license a superhero and then make a game around it. You have to convince the owners of those superheroes that you're going to make a great game, that you're going to portray those characters in the correct way. Sony already owning Spider-Man and already having a world-class studio, and Insomniac handed this IP to them, and they completely knocked it out of the park. One of the best, if not the best, open-world superhero games ever. So what can Microsoft do? Well, they are purchasing Activision, Blizzard, and King, and yes, that deal is going to go through. Before I get going, pay attention to the traversal here. Pay attention to the way Spider-Man moves throughout the world. Pay attention to the world and the things that he is able to do, the player is able to do when pretending to be this character, this hero in a game, because that's what sells this, the idea, the hero fantasy, and giving you all of the tools that Spider-Man would have in a real open world, and just being able to do it is so incredibly cool. Now, what can Microsoft do? Activision, Blizzard, King. There are a lot of IPs. Instead of licensing out a superhero, how about creating your own open world with a hero in it that has almost the same moveset, or maybe even a bit better? And that's where I think something is being overlooked, because in 2009, a little title came out that did all of this. Not as good looking, not as fast, and not as fluid, but given the update in technology and a good studio being put on the job, I think it can be just as good, if not better, and give Microsoft their own hero branded game. And that game is Prototype. So again, this game came out in 2009, and it was on older hardware. They were pushing the Xbox 360 here, but look at the open world, look at the city, and look at the way that the character is able to move throughout the city. All of the cool and unique things that this character can do in this world, in this game. It is just as fluid, it is just as fast, and it is just as cool as what Spider-Man is doing in that first game, and conceivably in the second game. And what's great about this is it is a brand new, unique character. There's a unique story. It's just an IP that's sitting there waiting to be resurrected. If you put a great team on this and they create an amazing looking open world to rival or match that in the first Spider-Man or Spider-Man 2, and then give this character all of the abilities, even just the abilities that he had in this first game, it will feel, it will play, and it will give those players that same experience, that same exhilarating feeling of being a hero in an open world. And by the way, there are so many things that you can do in this game that you can't do in Spider-Man, because this is a new hero. You can take characters and you can morph into them. You can absorb them into yourself. You can play with the idea of stealth, and it happens in this game. It's so cool to just take over, say, some military leader, get yourself into a base and just walk in and then walk out. Of course, you can do it the hard-nosed way and just burst your way in and use all of your crazy, sick powers that this character has. Check him out here, morphing back, and then just morphing with claws to go in and destroy things. This is a game that is just waiting. It is just sitting there waiting. And Activision has some of the rights to this game. I believe Free Radical also has some rights, but having half of the rights is better than having no rights, making it easier to put something together to create a game that can match that superhero, can scratch that superhero itch that Microsoft and Xbox desperately needs to stand toe-to-toe with what Sony's able to put out with Spider-Man, let alone now Wolverine coming exclusively to the PlayStation 5. It's interesting, while I was replaying Prototype all of a sudden I started to think of Spider-Man. And as I'm playing it, I'm thinking to myself, you know, I've done this. I've had this exhilarating feeling of moving through an open world as a superhero and doing all these cool things. And then I went back and played a little bit of Spider-Man. And then I went back and I played a little bit of Prototype. And I thought to myself, okay, in 2009, they had this idea locked down. They didn't have the technology. They didn't have the right studio in place. But the basics are all here. And when you look at these two games side by side, the character in Prototype is doing everything that Spider-Man is doing in a large open world and has a lot of his own unique, cool abilities that add to the gameplay, much in the same way that Spider-Man does. But I think Prototype could give Microsoft and Xbox that superhero game that sets it apart. It is their own character, it is a new character, and they can do a lot with this IP. The question is, can they do it? Do they have a studio that can do it justice? Do they even want to do that? I'm sitting here thinking it's a no-brainer. Why go out and try and license a character? It's going to cost you a fortune to get a Superman or some other character, a Batman, any kind of character. It's going to cost a fortune. Then you have to convince them that you're going to do that character justice. Why not just use what you already have? Once the ABK deal is closed, they've got half of the rights to Prototype. Why not use it? Because I think ultimately it will scratch that superhero itch in the same way that Spider-Man does, but also in many different ways that Spider-Man can't, because it is an original character with original powers. Let me know what you think in the comment section below if you've played Prototype. Let me know what you think about my idea here, because I think it's a no-brainer. They're getting Activision. Prototype is under Activision. Half of the rights belong to Activision. The other half, I believe, belong to Free Radical, who did the game. Much easier to get something going when you've got half the rights versus zero rights, which I mentioned earlier in the video. And I think this game can give Spider-Man a run for its money in the open world action adventure / superhero genre. Thanks for watching the video. If you liked it, think about hitting the like button, maybe subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.